The criminal cases against President-elect Donald Trump, well, look, they're all coming to a close. Now, as we speak, Special Counsel Jack Smith, he is dropping his cases against Trump after his win in the 2024 presidential elections. Now, look, I'm curious. Let me know in the comments. Do you think they should get dropped? Do you think they should bring him back in the future? Do you think Trump should just turn the tables on him? I'm curious. Let me know. But meanwhile, President Joe Biden, well, he is allegedly mulling sending nuclear weapons to Ukraine before he leaves office. And as this happens, well, alerts over the potential of World War III is now sweeping across Europe. You even have a few countries, including the UK, talking about maybe having to send troops to Ukraine to fight against Russia. And look, in other news, well, look, the owners of MSNBC, they are struggling to survive and potentially going to put the network up for sale. And now, guess what? Billionaire Elon Musk, he is talking about buying MSNBC. It started out as a joke. They were joking about it, but now it seems that he's actually serious, and he has even now detailed his plans to potentially buy the network. I'll be talking about these stories and more today, so let's jump into it. Now, first of all, Special Counsel Jack Smith, he has officially, in writing, decided to end the legal cases against President-elect Donald J. Trump. Now, he has dropped the charges in his election interference case, at least submitted to drop them, and also is moving to drop his appeal of a judge's decision in the President-elect's classified documents case. You also have the New York case getting postponed indefinitely, meaning they could potentially charge Trump in the future, and also old Fani Willis, well, she's dropping her case as well. Now, look, this will bring a close to the federal investigations and the many others, which included the raid on Trump's home at Mar-a-Lago. And this takes place, notably, as the other charges are getting dropped or postponed as well, and as Trump is promising to investigate the investigators, right? Now, first of all, this is the document from Special Counsel Jack Smith, the official one. It says, as a result of the election held on November 5th, 2024, the defendant, Donald J. Trump, will be inaugurated as president on January 20, 2025. It has long been the position of the Department of Justice that the United States Constitution forbids the federal indictment and subsequent criminal prosecution of a sitting president. But it says the department and country have never faced this circumstance here, where a federal indictment against a private citizen has been returned by a grand jury and a criminal prosecution is already underway when the defendant is elected president. Now look, on these charges, you could also say that the nature of the charges, many of them are unprecedented as well. They have novel interpretations of the law in many regards, and novel forms of going after somebody in many regards. And so you could say across the board, there's a lot of things that have no precedent, right? That never been done before. But Smith notes, confronted with this unprecedented situation, the Special Counsel's Office consulted with the Department of Office of Legal Counsel, the OLC, whose interpretation of constitutional questions, such as those raised here, is binding on department prosecutors, meaning he has no choice. He says, after careful consideration, the department has determined that OLC's prior opinions concerning the Constitution's prohibition on federal indictment and prosecution of a sitting president apply to this situation, and that as a result, this prosecution must be dismissed before the defendant is inaugurated. All the charges got to go away before January 20th, in other words. He notes that prohibition is categorical and does not turn on the gravity of the crimes charged, the strength of the government's proof, or the merits of the prosecution, which the government stands fully behind. He's basically saying that he still believes that all the charges have merit, and he still basically believes that Trump should be charged. That's essentially what he's saying here. But he says, based on the department's interpretation of the Constitution, the government moves for dismissal without prejudice of the superseding indictment under federal rules of criminal procedure 48A. The government has conferred with the defense counsel, who does not object to this motion, meaning it's all over, right? This whole thing has now come to an end, at least for now. It's not to say that Trump will not be charged in the future, that they won't bring these charges back, which they might, especially the New York case. They didn't get rid of it. They just postponed the indictment or the sentencing indefinitely. But at least for now, this is over. Now, like, I get the sense, also reading this document, that ending the special counsel investigation and the cases are being done begrudgingly. It does not sound like Jack Smith actually wants to end these, but he's being forced to. And remember, he's tried to appeal and keep this battle going, as he's been challenged by different judges and so on anyways. He's been very strongly pushing this. The wording does make it sound like they wanted to keep the charges. But after that initial statement, well, look, Jack Smith, he then goes over the details of the legal consideration on ending the investigation and the various cases. It does seem that he stands by his position. He stands by his belief in the validity of the case, and he's doing this because, well, the standards of the U.S. Constitution, and he can't keep it going. Now, look, at the same time, though, this also might just be the beginning. This may not be the end. It may be just the start of something new. It depends on how you look at it. Because what's happening now? Well, there's talk among Trump and his supporters that they may soon begin reviewing the various January 6 cases for pardons, meaning everybody who was charged for the whole January 6 case, and by the way, they're still bringing out charges against people. They're still arresting people. Everybody who's been charged, they're going to re-look at all those different cases and see, well, maybe we should pardon most of them or all of them or some of them. And as they go through that process, well, they're also going to be looking into how did this whole thing really happen, and maybe doing a re-review of the entire House investigation, which, again, they had 2 Republicans on it, but they were appointed by the Democrats. The Republican appointees on the House committee investigation on January 6th, they did not accept the Republicans who were put forward by the actual Republican Party. They chose people who had voted to impeach Trump on the Republican side. And there's been some questions over the validity, as many people who testified were later shown to have lied under oath. And it was also demonstrated that a lot of information was deleted or erased or altered. And the alteration of the information and the deletion of the information may have caused some other problems with the nature of the investigation, meaning it all very soon may face investigation. And the investigations are no longer going to be one-sided. Now, they've suggested also that they may turn the investigations into all the other areas of what has been happening over the last 4 years, and you could say even the last 8 years, because even when Trump was president last time, they had rolling charges and rolling investigations and rolling special counsels, all investigating him and his family and his supporters and just about every person within his cabinet. They're going to be looking at the other side now, and we'll see how far they go with it, but they are saying they're going to do it. Now, look, in other news, President Joe Biden, well, he is allegedly mulling sending nuclear weapons to Ukraine before he leaves office. I looked into these claims based on my interpretation. I don't know if Biden is actually doing this. It seems that people within his cabinet are doing it. But this is what's being reported. I want to detail what's happening. Russia also now, they're holding trainings in chemical warfare. It's actually not limited to that. It's also trainings for nuclear fallout and other things. And also various countries in the NATO alliance, the UK also, Germany, France, they're talking about sending troops to Ukraine. And alarms are being raised across the region over a possible World War III. Now, first of all, on the nuclear weapons, though, with the nukes, it's not clear whether the Biden administration would actually do this. The report claiming that Biden wants to provide nuclear weapons to Ukraine, this came from the New York Times. And basically, here's what they said. They said speeding up U.S. weaponry in the waning months of the Biden administration could help Ukraine enforce a ceasefire or armistice line if there were to be a settlement, officials said. Meaning, both sides, Russia and Ukraine, need to have cards for the upcoming negotiations. Ukraine doesn't have a whole lot of cards to play because they were mostly on the defense. They note the one gold standard security guarantee that Ukraine wants is an invitation to join NATO, a red line painted by Russia. But it may not happen under Mr. Biden. And an invitation, it says, is unlikely during Mr. Trump's presidency, meaning unless Biden does it, Ukraine's probably not going to get into NATO, basically. So they say U.S. and European officials are discussing deterrence as a possible security guarantee for Ukraine, such as stockpiling a conventional arsenal sufficient to strike a punishing blow if Russia violates a ceasefire. And they say on that, several officials even suggested that Mr. Biden could return nuclear weapons to Ukraine that were taken from it after the fall of the Soviet Union. That would be an instant and enormous deterrent, but such a step would be complicated and have serious implications. Now, personally, reading this, I don't get the sense they would move on it. Understanding the way that journalists often get their sources and stuff, my assumption is the New York Times interviewed a few random people who work in these negotiations, and somebody somewhere suggested, well, what if we just give nuclear weapons back to Ukraine? We took them after the end of the Cold War. What if we give them back? Basically. I don't think they would do it. That would mark a very serious escalation. You kind of don't play with nuclear weapons. That's one of the big red lines in the world right now. Even though you're seeing a lot more threats on it, that's a big red line. We'll see if they actually do it. Right? I'm not saying they won't, but they might. But we've seen on the other side of it that even putting up defenses against nuclear weapons has been very controversial to the extent that a lot of countries have decided not to do it. The United States putting in different nuclear weapon deterrences, again, missile defense systems in the UK, in Germany, and in other areas. The attempts to do this have been met with serious threats, massive controversy in the host countries. And if they wanted to give nuclear weapons back to Ukraine, it would be a lot more controversial than even that. But again, look, anything is possible, but this is the context of that claim. Now, remember also, Russia has been making nuclear threats all throughout this war. Now, they've set several red lines. Basically, a lot of those red lines have already been crossed, and we have not seen nuclear war. The latest, though, was recently when Ukraine was given permission to carry out long-range missile strikes deep into Russia. And the new escalation on the Russian side in response to that seems to be moving not just from nuclear threats, but also to the threat of chemical warfare. Now, this is related to a November 13th Russian video which showed its troops preparing for this type of war. And it states that according to Express, November 13th, day of radiation, chemical, and biological defense troops. The important context here is they're also preparing notably for radiation, meaning possible nuclear fallout or nuclear war, chemical warfare, and biological warfare, diseases and such. It also talks about preparations for camouflage of troops and equipment and for the use of flamethrowers and thermobaric weapons. Thermobaric weapons, they're types of explosives that tend to work on implosion. Russia, for some reason, tends to really like those types of bombs. They create very large explosions, technically using flame. And so they're sometimes called like flamethrower bombs or flamethrower weapons. They create kind of an implosion. They're pretty devastating. Russia is one of the countries that really favors those. They're talking about using those more, meaning not nuclear weapons, but very large bombs. Now, on the chemical weapon front, though, both Ukraine and Russia have already accused the other of using chemical weapons. This has already been part of the debate. In June 2024, the U.S. State Department announced that it made the determination also that Russia had in fact violated the Chemical Weapons Convention by using riot control agents on the battlefield. Now, this is different from like World War I and dropping nerve gas on people. It's not like that. But using essentially the things you would see during a riot or a policing situation to force people maybe out of their trenches or bunkers as a way of waging war. They're accusing them of that. And here's what the document actually says. It says the Department of State has made a determination under the CBW, the Chemical Weapons Act, essentially, that Russia has used chemical weapon chlorpyrifos against Ukrainian forces in violation of the Chemical Weapons Convention. And they say we make this determination in addition to our assessment that Russia has used riot control agents as a method of warfare in Ukraine, also in violation of the CWC. Meaning basically if Russia were to begin deploying chemical weapons more because of the nature of the war escalating, that would actually be likely at this point. And Ukraine might do the same. But look, back to the current escalations which we're now watching. The United Kingdom, France, they're discussing the possibility that they may send troops to Ukraine. We could see other countries now deploying their actual forces to the region. There's also talk of deploying private military contractors. We're already kind of seeing that actually. On the Russian side, this is already very much the case. You have North Korean troops now on the battlefield. You have a lot of other international mercenary groups already fighting, even Chinese and Indians in some cases. This is already happening. Now, Germany is also sounding the alarm. Germany is even now planning a public app on your smartphone or whatever that citizens can use to find emergency shelters in the event of an attack. This includes areas that can work like bunkers, like train stations or car parks and other locations like that. Meaning if they get hit by rocket attacks or who knows what, people will be given alerts to flee and seek shelter in various safe, relatively safe areas. Also now, the chair of NATO's military committee, this is Dutch Admiral Rob Bauer, he issued a warning as well. And he's actually urging businesses all around the world to begin preparations for what he calls a, quote, wartime scenario, including on preparing supply lines for a global war situation. And he said, quote, if we can make sure that all crucial services and goods can be delivered no matter what, then that is a key part of our deterrence. And on this, he also noted possible blackmail operations from Russia and the Chinese Communist Party. Watch this.
If we can make sure that all crucial services and goods can be delivered no matter what, then that is a key part of our deterrence. We're seeing that with the growing number of sabotage acts. And Europe has seen that with energy supply. We thought we had a deal with Gazprom, but we actually had a deal with Mr. Putin. And the same goes for Chinese-owned infrastructure and goods. We actually have a deal with Xi.
Now, he adds that although they have a deal with CCP leader Xi Jinping, it seems like on the business side and the supply side, this is a deal to keep supplies and things like rare earth minerals and medical products going, right? It would be naive, he says, to think the CCP would not leverage that to their favor, because we've seen them do it before. Watch this.
We are naive if we think the Communist Party will never use that power. Business leaders in Europe and America need to realize that the commercial decisions they make have strategic consequences for the security of their nation. Businesses need to be prepared for a wartime scenario and adjust their production and distribution lines accordingly. Because while it may be the military who wins battles, it's the economies that win wars.
Now look, the business and supply lines, this is actually a really big topic, especially for the United States. And here's why. Remember recently, there was a U.S. military assessment, just recently, again, a few months back, right? It said that if a war with the Chinese Communist Party were to break out right now, they said the United States would be projected to lose that war. And that wouldn't be because our military is not good enough or whatever else. The reason for that is it had to do with we'd lose too much domestic manufacturing. We don't make things in America anymore. We don't have the factories, we don't have the minerals, we don't have the supply lines, we don't have the steel, we don't have it because we've offshored it. And if we're dependent on the Chinese Communist Party and we're at war with them and we can't get medical products or anything like that because we don't make it domestically, well, what's going to happen if we get pulled into a long war? That was the concern. But this is where it gets interesting. That assessment was also based on the idea the United States was going to go to war like that alone. That's something we're seeing change with these global alliances. But more importantly, because of that assessment, they're now calling for the return of American domestic manufacturing, the return of American domestic mining, the return of the American industry, because it's no longer just about business. It's about the potential of going to war and the survival of our nation. You're going to see those things return to America because we need to make them return to America. And also the United States is going to be strengthening its alliances with other countries to combat the possible future of a supply line disruption and make sure we can keep things running even if we go to war with the Chinese Communist Party. Now, this brewing conflict could also very easily turn global. What we're watching right now. Look, in many ways it already is. Alongside the current threats, Russia right now is saying it may deploy medium and short-range missiles to Asia as well. And remember, Russia is a big country. They actually stretch not just into Western and into Europe, they stretch through the Middle East, and they also stretch into, again, the Far East in China. Again, they're a country that kind of spans the whole breadth of that, not to mention that they're also an Arctic power. And so moving weapons between regions for them is not that big of a deal, but for the rest of the world, that means different war theaters, especially as it relates to North Korea and again to the Chinese Communist Party. Now, in response to this threat and others along those lines, including from the Chinese Communist Party, Japan in the Eastern theater now, they're working with the United States to form a new missile plan, which could see them deploying missiles. Because remember, the U.S. was doing this already, but Japan's going to be doing it now as well. Japan is going to be deploying missiles in various parts of the eastern region, including on Japanese islands and in the Philippines. They're working to respond to a possible Chinese Communist Party attack on Taiwan, which is becoming more and more apparent as, again, this whole thing escalates. Now, as this happens also, though, look, the big elephant in the room is the incoming Trump administration. It's not that far out. We've got about 60 days or 2 months, right? It's getting close. Trump's pick for U.S. National Security Advisor, that's Mike Waltz, he is calling for an end to the escalations between Russia and Ukraine. Watch this.
We need to bring this to a responsible end. We need to restore deterrence, restore peace, and get ahead of this escalation ladder rather than responding to it.
Now, this is important because, as I mentioned previously, a lot of this comes down to the Chinese Communist Party. I said before any of this happened that the Chinese Communist Party was planning and publicly stating that they wanted to drag the United States into multiple wars. They wanted a war with Russia. They wanted a war against a terrorist organization, which we now have. Look at it. They also wanted a war in South America. They wanted Brazil to start a war. And with Lula now in Brazil aligning with the Chinese Communist Party, that may happen, especially as it relates to their growing alliance with Venezuela and the possible war going into the north there, again, because they're looking into some of the oil reserves in that region. This is what the CCP has been talking about. And so if the United States can end some of these wars, it means the CCP does not have the United States military and the global military focused on multiple theaters, and we can respond exclusively to them. That's what the CCP does not want. And so if they can make peace deals and start cooling tensions, that means that whole plan is off the books. Now look, on another topic, but in related news, Trump is reportedly talking about a day one plan to kick transgender troops out of the U.S. military. Now look, keep in mind, this is a rumor. The Trump team is saying basically they don't think it's true. I'm not sure if this is true or not, but I want to show you the sourcing of this. I want to show you where this is coming from. The sourcing for these claims, it's anonymous, as it often tends to be. The Times, though, they had the exclusive, and here's what they're saying. They said Donald Trump is planning an executive order that would lead to the removal of all transgender members of the U.S. military, defense sources say. Anonymous sources in the Defense Department. They say the order could come on his first day back in the White House, January 20th. There are believed to be about 15,000 active service personnel who are transgender. They would be medically discharged, which would determine that they were unfit to serve. It would also lead to a ban on trans people joining the military and would come at a time when almost all branches of the American Armed Forces are failing to meet recruitment targets. They say as well, the ban is expected to be wider ranging than a similar order made during his first term in office, when Trump prevented transgender people joining the armed forces but allowed those already serving to keep their jobs. President Biden rescinded the order, but this time even those with decades of service will be removed from their posts, according to several sources. And here's what they said, quote, They said these people will be forced out at a time when the military can't recruit enough people. A source familiar with Trump's plans said, allegedly, again, an unnamed source, but added, quote, only the Marine Corps is hitting its numbers for recruitment, and some people who will be affected are in very senior positions. Again, some of the heads of the military are transgender, as you've seen. Now look, according to Newsweek, Trump's transition team has denied this. They say that there's not been any decision made on this. And here's what they said. They say Trump's transition team denied that any decisions on the issue had been made. Spokeswoman Caroline Levitt told Newsweek that the unnamed sources, quote, are speculating and have no idea what they are actually talking about. She said no decision on this issue have been made. No policy should ever be deemed official unless it comes directly from President Trump or his authorized spokespeople, she said. In other words, it's a rumor, folks. It seems that there are people in the Defense Department speculating that they're all going to be fired. And that speculation is them saying that Trump is going to do it. That's the nature of this. There's been no order on it. There's been no public discussion on it, no plan on it. This is purely a rumor. But it is true that during Trump's first term in office, we did see him forbid the enlistment of new transgender people. They were not eligible to enlist. Now, he might bring that back. That does not mean that transgender people are going to be fired all throughout the military. He's not saying that. He is, however, saying that the DEI initiatives, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the race narratives, and the gender narratives, that is not going to have a place in the U.S. military. And also calling for investigations, possibly, and allegedly launching these investigations currently into many military leaders who've been part of botched plans like the pullout from Afghanistan and other forms of possible corruption which could see them court-martialed. And also those who were in senior positions advancing gender policies and race policies which may have violated the rights of our service members. Because look, you can say you're transgender, fine. You do you. But if you discriminate against other people, if you're discriminating against men or women and you're in a senior position, you're held by the Civil Rights Act just like everybody else. If you are whatever race in the books, right? Look, I'm mixed race. I don't care about this stuff. But if you discriminate against white people, that is still discrimination according to the law, even though it's not being interpreted that way right now. If you go by the civil rights law, it doesn't say accept white people. It is still discrimination. And they're saying that they may be looking into civil rights violations of all these people throughout the entire government, including the Pentagon. And so you could see a lot of people get purged, not because they're transgender as they're suggesting here, but because they've aligned themselves with these discriminatory agendas like DEI. That is what they're going to be doing. Now look, as this happens, look, we'll have to see what goes on. On a broader note, though, it is the case again that in his first term when Trump was president, he did prevent transgender people from enlisting. And it's also true the military has been facing a recruitment crisis. Now, will this solve the issue, if banning them or whatever else? Do you think people will now want to join the military? Do you think this will heal some of those wounds? You tell me. Let me know in the comments. I'm curious. The other big thing, of course, wasn't just that. It was also the COVID mandates. And a lot of members of the military who had maybe personal beliefs, religious beliefs that may have prevented them from getting those shots. A lot of them also felt that they were being discriminated. And there was also many who believed there was religious discrimination taking place. My point being, there were many reasons why I think we're having a recruitment crisis, not just limited to like the trans issue. There were a lot of things that are going to have to be addressed. Now look, in other news, Elon Musk might actually buy MSNBC. We talked about this a bit yesterday. It looks like he's serious about it. This whole thing started as a joke. That joke has now escalated. I'll be talking more about this, though, after I come back from a quick break, and we'll be back in less than 60 seconds, so don't go anywhere.
Experts agree. One of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges. With a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold, you can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Welcome back. Folks, MSNBC, they are struggling to survive, and they might get even auctioned off. Now, potentially, the network might go up for sale, being realistic. And now billionaire Elon Musk, he is talking about buying MSNBC. This whole thing started as a joke. They were joking about it. Don Jr. posted something about it. Elon Musk responded. It now seems that Elon Musk is actually serious. Elon Musk may actually buy MSNBC. But look, even aside from the potential sell-off of MSNBC, there's a big shakeup taking place in the media landscape regardless. Comcast, which owns a lot of media, Comcast is planning to move the network, MSNBC, and several others that it owns into a new company. Basically, look, the corporate networks, they're not doing well. Trump got elected president again, and they just killed over. Their ratings crashed. A lot of them are firing people. A lot of them are looking to reduce the wages of some of their major hosts. They're not doing so hot. And Comcast does not seem to want these not doing so hot companies affect the overall shares of their company. And so what do? Well, they're quarantining them in a separate IPO, it seems, which will also make it easier to sell them. Now look, part of that also has to do with MSNBC, and they're not taking it so well, it seems. New York Post said this: panic engulfed MSNBC headquarters Wednesday after parent company Comcast confirmed a massive spin-off of its cable properties, with the top executive even suggesting the left-leaning network may be forced to change its name. Maybe to something with X in there, right? Now, they note that MSNBC stars Rachel Maddow, Chris Jansen, and Katie Tur joined a tense 10 a.m. meeting at 30 Rock in Midtown, led by NBC Universal Chairman Mark Lazarus, who will lead the new company, sources told the Post. It says staffers fearing looming layoffs peppered him with questions about whether the network will need to change its name, logos, and maybe even headquarters after reports surfaced that the new entity, the new business, could be cut off from the reporting muscle of NBC News, sources said. And if they're cut off from NBC, well, they can't really call themselves MSNBC, right? We'll see. Now look, that's panic taking place based on Comcast saying they might sell off the property. That has nothing to do even with Musk possibly buying the company. We don't know how they're reacting to that. There were some videos going around of Rachel Maddow crying. That was in relation to another story. Some people were falsely attributing it to that. We'll see how this all unfolds, but generally speaking, Elon Musk, he's been ruffling the feathers of many big corporate news outlets for a good while now. Many of them are unhappy about him buying Twitter and then turning it into X and then creating a free speech platform. A lot of them do not like that. Many of them are very unhappy that he's pushing for citizen journalism, that he has a streaming service, that he's let people like Tucker Carlson broadcast there. They're mad. They're big mad. And now this has become another point of debate. And this was even raised during a recent speech from the new CEO of Axios, which is now going viral. Have a look at this.
Everything we do is under fire. Elon Musk sits on Twitter every day, or X today, saying like, we are the media, you are the media. My message to Elon Musk is, you're not the media. You having a blue check mark, a Twitter handle, and 300 words of cleverness doesn't make you a reporter any more than me looking at your head and seeing that you have a brain and telling you have an awesome set of tools makes me a damn neurosurgeon, right? Like what we do, what journalists do, what you did in Mississippi, what Al Jazeera does in the Middle East. You don't proclaim yourself to be a reporter. Like that's nonsense. Like being a reporter is hard, really hard. You have to care. You have to do the hard work.
Now, Elon Musk is pushing back on that. He's been repeating a new slogan that X has been using. And the new slogan is, "You are the media," referring to citizen journalism, meaning, again, if you're posting on there, you're being part of the process of freedom of information, freedom of debate, freedom of discussion, and citizen journalists able to report what they find from the ground everywhere in the world. That's the new slogan of X. You are the media. And he wrote this also. He said, the legacy media forgot that honesty really is the best policy. And he said, now you are the media. Meaning that maybe these big news outlets have killed themselves with dishonesty, and people are turning to things they agree with and believe, which is not these big media, right? Now, like, agree, disagree. I'm curious actually what your thoughts are. Let me know in the comments. And in other news, folks, look, it's the end of an era. A chapter of this world has come to a big close. President Joe Biden, he just held a farewell dinner on the south lawn of the White House, and it's being regarded as his farewell event. This is the end of an era. And Biden gave an address also. Let me show you. Have a look.
One thing I've always believed about public service, and especially the presidency, is the importance of asking ourselves, have we left the country in better shape than we found it? And tonight, I can say with all my heart, the answer to that question is a resounding yes, because of you. Because of you.
Now, with that event, it was reported that Vice President Kamala Harris was not present. And, you know, there's different rumors on this. Some believe it's in context to this whole picture that's come out. A lot of the corporate media is reporting it, claiming there were tensions between the Biden family and Kamala Harris. And that, you know, Biden maybe didn't campaign for her as he suggested he would, and that maybe he threw some wrenches in the machine. There are rumors of this. Now, on the surface, she's allegedly on a week-long trip in Hawaii with her husband, and they're winding down for the campaign trail. She campaigned pretty hard. She was thrown to it last minute, and she's on vacation, right? That's why she didn't show up. But there's also talk that she may be considering running again in the future, and there is some merit to this. A recent poll found that Kamala Harris is still the preferred candidate among Democrats for the next 2028 election. Kamala Harris has about 41% vote in the polls. She's the closest, right, by far. The next closest to Kamala Harris would be California Governor Gavin Newsom, and he only has about 8%. Kamala Harris has 41% of Democrats. Newsom, next in line, only has 8%. That's a big margin. Now, on the Republican side, actually, Republicans are saying that Vice President-elect J.D. Vance, they're the one they would like to see run in 2028. About 37% of Republicans want J.D. Vance to run next time. And Vivek Ramaswamy, Nikki Haley, they're tied in second with about 9%. Now, look, that said, we're probably going to watch a lot of new political figures come up over the next 4 years. That tends to be the way things work. But with Kamala, for a possible 2028 run, her supporters do seem to be taking notice of these polls, and she's even allegedly saying now that she is keeping her political options open. That said, folks, let's jump into some comments and let's have a discussion ourselves. Let me know what you think of all this. Again, if you have questions, comments, leave them in the chat. Let's jump into them. Also, hit the like button. It helps us out as well. Let's see here. Idaho Rocks, you're saying, liberals used to be anti-war doves. Now they're pushing for escalation of war while conservatives push for peace. What changed? It is true. If you go back to the elections with like George Bush and, George Bush and John Kerry during the start of the Iraq War and the Afghan War, the whole narrative among the Democrats was anti-war. That was the same for a long time. That was the same going back to like Vietnam. Democrats were always the anti-war party. Republicans were deemed to be more the pro-war party. George Bush himself campaigned saying that I am a war president. Do you remember this? Now, the nature of the Republican Party at that time, up until probably up until Donald Trump, was Republicans were more the big business party and they were the war party. If you wanted those two, military-industrial complex, whatever else, you probably wanted the Republicans. The Democrats were considered the anti-war party. They were the hippies. They were the 60s ones, protesting against everything. They were the ones trying to pass laws to make it so that troops had, tighter rules of engagement and things like that. They were the ones who did not want us going to war, at least on the surface. What changed? Well, interestingly, as I've mentioned many, many times, I believe Donald Trump and his phenomena changed the nature of both parties. The Republican Party today is no longer the same party. The Democrat Party today is no longer the same party. What has happened? Now, and again, I'm just talking about the surface narratives. Right? I'm not talking about the full context of all their policies. They have a lot of different policies. This is in no way representative of the entire thing. But if you look at what took place when Trump was elected, remember when Trump was first elected back in 2016, he had a supermajority. He had a supermajority. He had the House and he had the Senate, like he has now. What happened back in 2016? A lot of Republicans challenged him. Even though he had a supermajority, he could not pass a lot of his policies because Republicans were blocking him. Now, some suggest with some of the appointments we're seeing to the Senate right now that we may be watching the same thing happen. I don't know. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. They are suggesting they're more behind him this time, and he does have a lot more support among his party. The reason he has more support among his party is because the nature of the Republican Party has changed. A lot of the Bush-era Republicans went to the Democrats. That was the big shift. 2016, many members of Congress did not run for re-election. A lot of Republicans did not, again, go for re-election. That allowed for a lot of new candidates to come in. And you had a shift within the nature of the party. You had guys like Matt Gaetz and others come in, right? And these folks became what was later known as the Freedom Caucus. The Freedom Caucus representing, again, the Trump phenomena. When Trump was pushed out of office, again, 2020, Biden was elected, what happened then? The Republican Party, the RNC, basically told Trump, hey, get behind us, support us. Trump essentially told them, no, I'm the new Republican Party, you get behind me. Trump started his own political action committee, which then undermined the RNC, right? This did happen. And he demonstrated that the new party is here to stay. A lot of people believe that had Trump not gotten reelected this time, right, 2024, that the phenomena he represented would have gone away as well, maybe within not that much time. But if he serves 2 terms, the shift within the culture of the party will be ingrained, and the party will fundamentally be different from now and forever until who knows what, right? There's been a change in the party. Now, a lot of people who don't like Trump, they went to the other side. The Democrats saw an influx of kind of old guard Republicans. They saw the Bush party join the Clinton party and so on, and they became that. Also because they had the grassroots, the far left, the Democrat Socialists of America. And you have groups like, the Squad, for example, representing that faction. Their party became kind of really more like an establishment party. Whereas the Trump party became more of like a a populist party. And I know populism is framed as a bad word these days. It goes back to the Roman Empire. It essentially means that you serve the interests of the people, right? Whereas the establishment serves the interest of the establishment. That means the pro-war party, that means the big business party, that means the grassroots radical party. They all became part of the same umbrella. And the nature of the Democrat Party was perceived, at least, with that shift. They were the big media, they were the big corporations, they were Hollywood, they were entertainment. Look at who campaigned on the Democrat side during the last election. It was all those people. Look at who campaigned on the Trump side during the last election. It was all these random people who were kind of written off as crazies or whatever else by the media. It was all the outcasts, right? It's the populist party. It's the average person. It's the average Joe, like Joe Rogan and so on. It's the everyman party. That was the shift. And the battle was more about what has more control now over what the people of the country demand. The populist party winning essentially showed that Hollywood and big media and the entertainment industry and all these big singers and celebrities and so on, they don't have as much control over the average person's psyche as they used to. They're not as popular as they used to be. And even if you get every one of them campaigning behind you, they don't have the same gravitas as they used to. Whereas on the other side, a lot of the new journalists, a lot of the podcasters, people who've become internet celebrities, the populist side, again, they have gained more power. And this is really what we're watching within the nature of the shift within both parties. The parties have fundamentally changed. They've fundamentally changed. And I know that oftentimes within political debate, they say, oh, well, Trump has the alt-right and the Democrats have the far left. That was true for a while. I would say Trump actually lost most of the alt-right. A lot of the actual like neo-Nazi types, they turned against him. Many of them were actually criticizing him leading up to the last elections. And the Democrat side too, Democrat Socialists of America, they're not endorsing. They didn't even endorse AOC, for example. They've actually broken away as well. And so both parties are in a state right now where they can avoid the extremes. One of the big questions going forward will be, can they maintain that state? The challenge for the Democrats is they're going to need to recapture a voting base. They need to get new voters. And many believe that the extreme left actually made them too radical to catch the moderates. And some believe that if they can go more towards the middle, get the classical liberals, like even maybe libertarians, which they used to kind of be. Libertarians would be classical liberals in many regards, or minarchists, small government and so on. If they can recapture that, and people who say live and let live, that's a possible strategy for them. But the fundamental point I'm talking about with war and stuff is because the parties changed. The parties actually did change. And again, you're probably going to watch them change even more, especially as the Democrat Party recovers from being 20 million still in debt. And they need to have someone bail them out. And they're not doing so well either financially or in terms of the influence front, especially because a lot of the media that is more favorable to them is not doing well. You're going to watch a shift in the entire political landscape right now, and I think we're watching it. Gina Mikulik, you're saying, I don't think it would be popular to refile the charges 4 years from now. 4 years in politics is a lifetime. Many players won't even be in office then. You're talking about Jack Smith and the special counsel. Yeah, well, that's going to be complicated because even in New York, where they have indefinitely postponed the sentencing of Trump, remember, they already got a guilty verdict. They can just sentence Trump now. They didn't actually get rid of that. They have kept that on the books. And what's going to happen? Trump's president for 4 years, and then this random judge comes out and says, okay, sentencing back on former president. And they try to throw him, in jail in New York or something like that. 4 years is Gina's done. Yeah, 4 years is a long time. 4 years is enough time for people to forget about things like this. 4 years is enough time for wounds to heal. 4 years is enough time to launch very thorough investigations into how those charges were brought about, notably. And the question is, would they try to bring them all back 4 years from now? I don't think it would look good in terms of optics on the other side, because the charges will reflect on the Democrat Party if they have not changed by then. We'll see. And I think also that you're going to want, what I think is going to happen, I mean, just on a personal, because Trump is saying he's going to do it. Because they've kept these charges on the books, Trump's legal team is going to be challenging them. And Trump believes that the justice system has been politicized. Whether he has been charged or not, or guilty or not, his narrative publicly to his supporters has been that they're not going after me, they're going after you, I'm just in the way. And he believes, and many people do, that there are fundamental problems within the justice system, whether it's the DEI initiatives, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and race-based prosecutions, which factor in a person's race on whether or not they're sentenced or how they're sentenced. There is what people perceive as partisan-based discrimination, where it's believed there's a two-tiered system of justice where Republicans get investigated and charged while people on the other side tend to not. And they believe that a lot of the criminal charges we've seen come about have a political nature to them. There is the concern that the light on crime policies have actually caused a lot of harm to people. And as part of that, whether you view it as retribution, whether you view it as the restoration of justice, Trump is saying he's going to do it. And not only will they be looking into what they call the weaponization of justice, they are going to be doing that. They're also talking about even possibly opening up criminal charges against the prosecutors who have publicly stated their intent to factor in race or whatever else in terms of prosecutions, who have made like the revolving door when it comes to bail, where you have guys who go on stabbing sprees and they're like out on bail the next day. That's actually happening. You just had that happen in New York. That just happened in New York. This stuff happens, right? You have people who commit serious crimes or threats of serious crimes, get arrested, they're let out on bail, and then they actually carry it out. They're suggesting now that the prosecutors, many of whom were part of this whole Soros initiative of race-based law enforcement. Soros wrote about it publicly in the Wall Street Journal, right? Many of them got money for that and have stated publicly their intent to do that, and have even colluded with each other in some instances where they've held events and had communications demonstrating the intent and the coordinated intent to manipulate law in favor of that type of politics. They could face criminal charges. They could face lawsuits from the victims. Trump has said they're going to open it up for that. He said this in a public video, and they're going to be going after it. And so I personally don't believe, I personally think that them maintaining the threat of prosecuting Trump 4 years from now is going to be harmful to them, because it will force Trump, even beyond this, to go after them, and he might. The other way you could interpret this is that they're maintaining the threat of prosecution in order to frame future Trump investigations and actions targeting these individuals, that they can, because there's pending charges, they can frame it as Trump trying to protect himself from being criminally charged. On the narrative front, that's going to be a very likely narrative. Oh, Trump is only doing this because he's going to get sent to prison once he leaves office, right? That's going to be the other narrative with this. You are going to hear that happen. And so that's the way I see it taking place. California guy, you're saying, if America becomes more independent with the goods we use, look out world. Our ingenuity will be unleashed if we are given enough freedom to do what we can. That's going to be a big hornet's nest to kick. Let me tell you, I'll tell you what. Let me explain. Now, understand, first of all, California got absolutely, this is the case. A lot of people don't want that to happen. I'm not talking about your average American. I'm talking about other people in the world. And why is that? It's because it's the same thing with the Monroe, what was it, the Monroe Doctrine? When America was formed, America reinterpreted the very nature of government itself. America set forward the very ideas of human rights. A lot of that did not exist prior to the forming of the United States. Prior to the United States, slavery was normal. People criticize America. How dare they have slaves? Name one country on the face of the entire planet that did not have slavery. The Native Americans enslaved each other. They tortured and genocided each other. Look at the Apache and the Comanche Wars, if you don't believe me, and look at what they did to each other. The Apache and Comanche Wars, look at it. Every country on God's green earth used to practice these things. Extreme punishment for crime was normal. In China, they had death by 1,000 cuts. In France, you know, the idea of chopping your hand off for stealing was a minimal punishment for crime in many parts of the world. There was brutal law. Law was brutal. Look at this. Look at the Spanish Inquisition, what they used to do. Burning at the stake, stretching, tortures like medieval stuff. That was normal for the world. That was normal up until the United States. The United States changed that. When the Declaration of Independence was written, the Declaration of Independence changed the interpretation of what human life is and created this idea of what human rights are. Now, you could argue that was part of the Enlightenment and kind of this great awakening taking place in the world at the time. But it essentially made it, even though you could say that America didn't abolish slavery until years later. That's not true, actually, because America actually was the first to abolish slavery. But that was before the forming of the United States, and so it was individual states. American states ended slavery before anybody, before anyone, before Europe, before any of those folks. American states ended slavery. Not all of them. The reason was because at that time, American states were countries. They were countries, not just part of a federal government, because the federal government had not yet been formed. When the Declaration of Independence was written, that created a global shakeup. And people all around the world said, hey, this is right. What it did was basically said the role of government is to protect the rights that have been given to us by God. That God gives us rights. That God protects certain inalienable rights that you cannot take away. And the role of government and the very nature of why we create government is to defend those rights which God has given us. That was the interpretation. What did that do? That made every single tyrant, every single dictator, every single person who had been abusing all of those rights, and you could only abuse those rights if you were powerful, that made every single one of them want to challenge this. Because they recognized if this idea can spread, all the people, you know, that live under me, all of them will think I'm the bad guy, right? Every tyrant on earth had a shot right over the bow. That's what that represented. When America succeeded in the American Revolution, and they won, and they created a government, you know, by the people, for the people, of the people, and they wrote the Constitution, taking it even further than the Declaration of Independence, emblazoning the very rights they defined in the Bill of Rights in American law, and creating a system of government that didn't even have taxes. There was no taxes. What did that do? That meant that everybody who wanted to escape tyranny and religious persecution and suppression of speech, everybody who wanted opportunity, everybody who wanted to build their own lives, they all left their tyrannical countries and they came here. And then America did something else, which is we created, I think was it the Monroe Doctrine? Where we would only recognize countries that had adopted our values. The American economy boomed. The American economy became a miracle on earth because suddenly The boot of tyranny was lifted off the backs of every single serf and every single peasant and every single person living in their country who thought that was the only way life could be. And they saw there was a different way that things could be done, and the tyrants of those countries hated it. They seethed. They said, how can you do this, right? America demonstrated that when given freedom, people can create wealth. That when given freedom, people can create stability. That if you defend people from harm, if you defend people from tyranny, then the individual defended from tyranny can become not only successful, can live not only in harmony, but can create wealth beyond that of any other nation on earth. American innovation changed the face of the planet. The American inventions, all the different things we developed here, changed the face of the earth. And then what happened? Communism emerged in Europe alongside the free system that emerged in the United States. And communism regarded the American system of freedom as its number one enemy, because communism represents the opposite. It represents tyranny in the most extreme forms. Tyranny under the narrative of liberation, right? Liberating you from what? You want to be liberated, go to America where you are free, where you don't live under a dictator, where you don't live under a tyrant, right? But all the tyrants of the world wanted tyranny. They wanted that power. They wanted to suppress people. And so all the tyrants of the world that wanted that, they got behind that. And you had two divergent systems fighting for power in the world. That was the nature of the Cold War. That was the nature of what we witnessed. We've been witnessing, maybe still witnessing. And the nature of the criticisms against America, saying, look at how chaotic America is. That's what freedom looks like. If you let people be free, you'll live in chaos. That was the narrative, right? Now, what we've seen with the United States is that it is true, as California Gal is saying, that if America becomes more independent with the goods we use, look out world, our ingenuity will be unleashed if we are given enough freedom to do what we can. The reality is that many of those policies that suppress the freedom of the individual have in fact been implemented in the United States. We don't have true capitalism anymore. We have crony capitalism. We don't have freedom of speech anymore. Freedom of speech is being suppressed by foreign dictators enforcing their censorship laws on American companies, which are forcing us to censor along those same lines. Woke policies dictating social conflicts between races and genders and classes and everything else are being taught to our kids in schools. Those types of tyrannical policies undermining the basic freedom of the individual are being enforced here, even if not through the government, because the Constitution protects us from that. We have a more grassroots type of tyranny and a foreign tyranny being instituted upon us because we have a lot of international companies beholden to foreign law, and foreign law is creating standards to enforce foreign law on American soil, bypassing the Constitution because it's being done through the private sector. What happens then if that type of foreign interference, foreign tyranny, and communist ideology is suddenly lifted off our backs? America will return to the prosperous nation it once was, and the demonstration of the power of freedom will once again be witnessed on the world stage. And every tyrant, every dictator, every corporate mogul looking to suppress the individual because it hurts them, they're going to cower in fear yet again, just like they did with the firing of that first shot with the Declaration of Independence. And I believe that's what's now taking place. And so, yeah, get ready for the return of American innovation. And get ready for the return of people witnessing the power of freedom, because we haven't seen it in a good while, frankly. Anyways, folks, I went a bit long on that. So, well, I can't jump into too many more questions. I think we're out of time. But that said, join me tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And again, I always enjoy having our conversations, folks. It's always a good time. That said, as always, please share this video. Help us get the word out. Break through the censorship. It helps us a lot. Hit the like button. And that said, folks, again, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.